In this lesson, we'll add finger controls. So for the fingers, what I like to do is control the rotation of each root, and then we can use custom parameters to drive the other sections. That way we're left with a very clean rig, and we still provide animators with a lot of control. Let's go ahead and begin. We'll create a circle. Let's head over to our Modify panel, and let's go ahead and set the radius to 1. From there, I like to just go in and reset its X-form and make sure it's collapsed down. Okay, great. So from here, again, we're going to use this to control each root. So that's going to be the main root for the thumb. Now, as this relates to the rest of the fingers, we're actually going to control these smaller bone objects here. This would be the standard root of each finger. And then we'll use custom parameters to drive our metacarpals and then the mid and end sections. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with the thumb. What I'll do is go ahead and take this object, and let's go ahead and Alt-A align it over to the thumb's root. Now, in order to select this a little bit easier, what we could always do is quick align it to the thumb's nub. At this point, what I'd like to do is go ahead and bring down the thickness a little bit more. Let's go underneath rendering, and we'll set the thickness to, let's say, about 0.5. Okay, great. Now, being that this is a control, it'd be a good idea to add this to our controls layer. So as we start to clone this object, we don't have to worry about this step for the other controls. Let's also rename this. That's going to be Anim L Thumb 01. Okay, great. Now this object, it's going to be linked to the hand bone. Alright, great. Now when we control its pivot, it's actually going to be from the root. We're just placing it right here at the nub, so we have a convenient way to grab this object. It's a good idea to go ahead and bring back the geometry just to check and make sure that we can grab this control easily. And I'd say that most certainly is the case, so we'll go ahead and leave it where it's at, and we'll now go ahead and hide our character. And I'll go back to wireframe mode. Alright, let's start to clone this object down the rest of the hand. So again, what we do is go ahead and clone the object. We can now rename it. We're going to the index finger next, so that's going to be index 01. Make sure this is a copy. We'll Alt-A align over to the root we'll control, so that's the smaller bone object. And then we'll want to quick align over to our nub. Now if you wanted to, if we were to go in and let's say clone another control, I'll go ahead and name this mid. So that's going to be Anim L Mid 01. If we wanted to, we could always go ahead and adjust our alignment tool. So watch, we can go ahead and align, yes, to this root bone here. But let's go ahead and uncheck position. So we're only aligning in orientation. So I'll choose OK. And now we can go ahead and quick align to our nub. So that's another way we can do this. But either way, let's go ahead and make sure that we continue that process for the other two fingers. I'll go ahead and pause the video. So once we have finished creating each finger control, it'd be a good idea to go in and recolor these objects. So I'll go ahead and select each, and we'll use that same color of light purple. Here it is. Alright, now we'll want the pivot of each control to be aligned to the bone that we have matched its orientation to. So since we have the pinky selected, let's go ahead and head over to our hierarchy panel. We'll choose Effect Pivot Only, and we'll go ahead and quick align to the root bone. Great. So let's go ahead and continue that for the other fingers. Again, we'll go ahead and quick align to the root that we'll drive. And then we'd be ready to freeze transforms on these objects. So then we can go in, grab the pinky, for example, since that's already taken care of, we can go in and just freeze down its transformations. So let's go ahead and continue that for the other fingers. Again, we go ahead and adjust the pivot, and then at that point we can go ahead and freeze the transforms of that control object. I'll pause the video. Okay, so each control should have been frozen at this point. You can see for the thumb, we want to make sure its pivot is right here at the root, and for the others, we know exactly where the pivot should be. All right, so we know now that the controls are going to drive the rotation of these bone objects. We also know that we'll use custom parameters to control the other sections. So what we could do, since we're under the hierarchy panel, is just go in and actually lock down the controllers that we will not animate with. So that's going to be scale, and that's also going to be our translation. So let's make sure we do that for the other controls. Again, we're going to lock down scale and movement, only leaving rotation available. I'll pause the video and take care of the other three controls. Okay, so each control has now been locked. The last step for this lesson will be to go in and orientation constrain to each root. So with the pinky control selected, let's go ahead and grab our orientation constraint and go ahead and tie it to the bone object that we aligned it to. Great, so now when we start to rotate, here's what we end up with. Actually want to make sure that we do that in the reverse order. We'll grab our bone object and orientation constraint to our finger control. All right, now when we start to rotate our control, here's what we should end up with. Great, so this is going to look really nice once it's all finished. Let's go ahead and do that for the other controls. Again, we grab the bone object, there we go, and go ahead and orientation constraint to our control. And then we can go ahead and test this out by rotating the control around. So let's go ahead and finish that up for the other control objects. If you notice that there's any shifting, chances are it's because that control's orientation is not matched to its bone. So at that point, you just want to center the pivot on the control, realign it, and then move the pivot back, freeze the control, and then you can freely go in and apply the orientation constraint. So let's go ahead and take care of that for the other fingers. And in the following lesson, we'll go ahead and wrap up our work on our finger controls.